This program has been approved for one IDCEC CEU. To receive credit for this program, please submit your full name, IDCEC number, program class code, and your summary essay to ceu@iida.org. The program class code is located alongside the title of this program on the IIDA Academy page. For a certificate of completion to use toward another certifying body, please submit the same information to ceu@iida.org. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Cheryl Durst, the Executive Vice President and CEO of IIDA, and I am more than excited to welcome you to Season 3, Episode 1 of our Collective Design series. And this program is an incredibly special one. Here we are in March, Women's History Month, and we're going to take some time to talk about women leading design and the new change makers in our industry. All right, we're going to get started. And before I introduce our panelists, I do want to let you all know that unfortunately Nanette Milner with the Rockwell Group is a bit under the weather and unfortunately can't join us today. But we do have with us Megan Dobstaff, who is a design director and senior associate at Gensler. And Megan is joining us from London. Hey, Megan. And then also Tara Headley, who's a designer and adjunct professor at SCAD, the Savannah College of Art and Design. And so Tara and Megan, why don't we get started? Let's see your faces. All right, there's Megan and there's Tara.
We're here. Hello.
Hello.
How are you both?
Doing well. Thank
Good.
you, Cheryl.
Great.
Thanks for mentoring.
Good. I am excited about this conversation and I'd love to start. I am a ridiculously curious person about everyone's origin stories. And so I'd love to hear from both of you, if you could share with me and with our audience a little bit about your path to and in design. How did it start for you? Tara, you want to get us started?
Sure, I can take that one. So I am from the lovely country of Barbados. I always like to lead with that. And my path to my career started very, very early. My mother was an art teacher by profession, and I used to hate this so much. She was my art teacher in primary school. And from 3 up until 10, I had her as my art teacher every year. I used to hate it, but I really focused on making sure that the other students didn't think I was cheating by having her do my art. So I went twice as hard in art class to make sure I circumvented that whole situation. And then my father, I refer to him as a jack of all trades. He was a banker by profession, but that was the least of what I saw him do. He was a chef. He did all the carpentry around our house. I don't recall us ever having to call a plumber, ever call a handyman to do anything. So I grew up seeing him do all of that. He built all the cabinets in our house. He built me a custom closet and a bookshelf and a custom aquarium out of wood. So I saw him doing all of that. So I think just naturally with him and then my mother being an art teacher, I was always going to do something creative. And I've been told that I said I was going to be an architect from the time I was 7. And that was probably only because I didn't know interior design was a thing. So growing up, that was my path. I wanted to be an architect. And then SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design, actually recruited from Barbados. They have some great jobs at SCAD. They send people everywhere. So in talking to that recruiter, I learned what interior design was. And it was like an aha moment, like that is what I wanted to focus on within architecture anyway, was the connection to the people and more of that scalable, closer to home feel. So I applied to SCAD. That was the only college I applied to. Don't know if that was smart at the time, but it all worked out. And that was a very specific path to my career. I'm very type A, and it was just kind of clear cut to me becoming an interior designer.
Wow, that's a great origin story. Thank you for sharing that. Megan, what about you? How did you get
That's
here?
solid. All right. Well, so I would say, so for as long as I can remember, I've always really been obsessed with how spaces and places and situations feel, right? Like I've always been like, oh, this feels really good. Like even as a kid, right? Like I have this very specific memory of like as a 5-year-old, I loved rainy days because it meant I got to sit at my little table with a lamp on during the day and read my like highlight magazines, right? So so I've always just been like, this feels really not like this space feels nice. I used to make my parents like rearrange the furniture in the house. I grew up in Ohio, so I'm from the States, Midwestern, right? Close to Chicago. But so pair that with every summer, we had our county fair, and we had one of the biggest county fairs in the state of Ohio. And every year I would save my allowances so that I could go multiple times into the fun houses, right? So those really the crazy distorted upside down, like weird mirrors, like crazy bridges, like the tunnel things that spin. Because I was like, what's around the corner? What's around? Like, I want to see like what the new fun house is going to be. And so when people would say like, what do you want to do when you get older? I'd be like, oh, I'm going to design fun houses. Like, I'm gonna build fun houses, right? Because like you said, Tara, I didn't know that interior design was a thing. And so when I started looking for colleges, it was sort of like, well, what am I going to do? I don't know what I want to do. And then it was like, oh, this is a real thing. Yeah. And so that's kind of how it went. I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. Yeah. Yeah.
From fun house to
Yeah.
interior
From a
design.
fun house, right? Yeah. Yeah.
It's so interesting that the common thread, and I'm seeing in the chat, and certainly we hear it at IIDA, that for many of us, the vocabulary is architecture. You have the word architecture, but the intent, the soul of what you want to do is really interior design. And it often takes, whether it's meeting an interior designer or getting to design school, when you really learn that that's what you want to do. Thank you both for that. Tara, let me ask you, let me go a little specific with you. As a woman of color, what has your journey in interior design been like? Do you feel that, did you have role models? Were there other women of color? Obviously, there have been a lot of shifts and changes, particularly in our industry. We know that women of color are underrepresented, but we are seeing more and more women of color in design. Would you mind chatting a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I think it really came to light when I joined the graduate program in Atlanta. I did my undergrad in Savannah, so it's not as connected to the industry, but once I entered my graduate program, I had a very specific focus of trying to be connected to the industry. And at that time, Ronnie Belizaire was actually about to or in line to become president of IIDA Georgia. So my kind of connection to jumping into IIDA was having a Black woman as president. And I remember how much that meant to me to have that. And now I'll be president starting in June. So it's coming full circle. So just, yeah, and having her, she's still in the industry as a mentor and someone to connect to, it just really means a lot. But in terms of the journey, I would like to call it strategic. I had to be very focused and strategic in setting my path. That is part to my personality and part because I think I just had to, because not only am I a woman of color, but I am an immigrant to the US. So there is no lagging when it comes to a timeline. The US wants you to tell them what you're doing and when and how. So I was on a little bit of a time crunch after graduating. We have about a year to find a job with our student visa. So I think that forced me to really set a plan and focus and plan things out really farther ahead than I think most have to. And I've stuck to that plan. Even if it's deviated a little bit, I've fallen back on things that I've set in place even years back that have helped me. So I would say strategic is what my journey has been.
Nice. Megan, does gender play a role in what we do as designers? Is there a gender imperative?
Oh my gosh, is there? Yes, there's always a gender imperative. Yeah, I was thinking about, so it's funny because I used to joke, right? Like in interior design school, there's like 50 women. I 50 women, 3 gay guys, and like 2 straight men, right? And in like your interior design class. And so, and we are, but interior design, women have always had like the upper hand. And I think, because it's obviously a very female dominated field. And I think that's one thing, which is really sort of amazing. And then I think that, so I came out when I was 15 and I lived in Ohio, and I was the only gay person that I knew aside from the person that I ended up dating. And so I've always had I have to kind of, Sarah, similar to what you were saying, it's like, I felt like I had to be the best version of a gay person because I was the only one that people were going to know. And so that mentality at 15 has 1000% carried into my career. And I'm like, well, I have to be the best. I have to be the best gay person. I have to be the best. I have to and I have to be the best mentor, and I have to be the best woman of all of these things. And in a way, I think, everyone has their own version of that. And I think, we just women really do have the upper hand in, I think, design and architecture, especially at this moment, because we're always thinking about those narratives and sort of letting them sort of drive our everyday sort of actions and behaviors. And so I would say the answer is yes, but I think we really are at a time where we have the upper hand and can just start to, navigate them into real practice, because everyone's finally ready to listen to them.
From a number standpoint, certainly in interior design as a whole, the profession itself is more than 80% female.
Right.
Within IIDA, our numbers we're more than 89%.
That's why, good to know.
But even with that number domination,
Sure.
there's evidence that shows that men practicing in interiors are still earning more money. So we still have that, we still have that pay equity gap. So with the conversation, right, at firms and in general culture, the conversation around EDI, the work takes such commitment. And from the two of you, how do you believe that we can collectively within firms and organizations really continue to affect change within EDI? Someone just popped up in the chat, like the old boy club is still very much alive and well, but how can we affect change in our industry, in our organizations, in firms? Either one of you.
Yeah, I think looking at it, my perspective is that we have a responsibility to make sure that the work that they're doing is authentic, right? So there's a lot of nice things that people are doing, but it feels sometimes like they're doing it to say they've done it and not really putting in the authenticity and the intent behind the work to diversify or increase equity or what have you. So there's a lot of conversations happening, right? But is there data that we can fall back at? What's the quantitative numbers and facts that you can pull out to say that you truly have improved as a firm? So if there's no checks and balances and you're just seeing lovely Instagram posts and think pieces being reshared, it's not really doing anything to equal out pay, right? So I just want, from a perspective of looking and making sure that things are can be checked, just to make sure that we're doing the work that we say that we're doing.
Yeah. And the data and the metrics will tell us that. Megan?
Yeah, I just kind of like made a note, like power in numbers. I think, again, like I really do think, I always say like the internet is so evil, but it's so wonderful in so many ways, because we finally are looking around and being like, oh, wait, there's YouTube. Oh, literally okay, it's not just me in a bubble, right, in Ohio by myself, like feeling and thinking these things in these ways. And so, I really think it's like, I'm going to probably say it a million times today, but it's really just realizing the power that we have now and that people are actually listening. And that, people who are not in a leadership position at a firm, like you and your colleagues, actually, if you get together and sort of put together a structured, intentional narrative backed by data and facts, power in numbers is a real thing. And I think, there's been a lot of examples that I've seen across the architectural industry. I work at a very large firm, and I think we've had, part of the reason that I think we've pushed ourselves to be sort of very intentional and action oriented on a lot of these different things over the course of the past couple of years is really because the younger generation at the firm kind of collectively got together and sort of put forth, the right narrative and really helped guide the ship and in such a positive way, because that's how the industry moves, right? Like the next generations kind of step into those positions. And so I think it's believing, it's looking around and saying, what can I do to move this, not what is someone else going to do for me, right? It's making sure that it's like join the effort. Don't just sit around and be like, well, why isn't this happening? So,
Very true.
so yeah.
Very true. There is very much right now this phenomena of leading from the middle. People looking around at their organizations and seeing often that leadership isn't coming from the top, or silence is coming from the top. And so this phenomena of folks who are leading from the middle and having kind of the courage of their convictions and speaking up and using their voices. And, is that something that's comfortable for the two of you, this moment of speaking up and speaking out and speaking loud?
Yeah, I never have an issue speaking my mind. You know this. So I think it's just being authentic, right? I think if the cause is important and the outcome is worth fighting for, I see no reason to not speak up. I've always been vocal about things that I need, things that I see that can change. And our industry has its difficulties, but every time I've spoken to someone to ask for help or to maybe affect change in some way, I've been met with nothing but support. So given that track record, I just keep talking. I just keep asking for things and seeing what I can do, because the answer is hardly ever no. It might be a not right now, we can see, or we'll work on that. But I just say, just speak up. You never know what can happen from that.
Yeah, I just saw that one of the comments about that said leaders at the top are scared. And I just think it's so important to add on to the, don't just sit around and be like, well, why aren't we doing it the right way, right? You have to sort of insert yourself into the sort of action-oriented way to move it across. But we also have to meet people where they're at, right? So the leaders that are the leaders in our industry are there because they did a lot of really amazing things to become leaders. And just because they don't, sometimes someone might not be comfortable with something or understand something or just totally believe that this is the right way to do things. That doesn't mean that it's a cause that's not going to happen, or that you're not going to be able to sort of get those people there. And I think, like you said, Tara, it's making sure that we're educated with this sort of facts, and we are also respecting and listening in both directions, because that's really the only way that everyone's going to get to these sort of next places with sort of a unified voice and intent.
And I think that brings up the fact too of people on the younger side of things now entering the industry don't necessarily have the experience and knowledge backed by the history and longevity. But I think that's a good thing, because they're asking the questions of, why is it this way? Why are we doing things like this when it can be better? So it's forcing that conversation, and you meet somewhere in the middle when you have the people with the expertise and history saying, well, this is how it's been and this is how it's worked out. And then you have someone challenging that to change it. And the answer, I think, is somewhere in the middle of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What has happened in the past can often be illuminating, but it can often be a burden as well. And so looking beyond the way we've always done things or the way that things occurred is, in this particular moment in time is really important. What about mentorship? What role has mentorship played? Mentorship or meaningful connections or being supported by a network or by a person. What role has that played for both of you personally and professionally? And is mentorship still something that we need to invest time and effort in?
So I'll say to that, yes, mentorship, right? Yes, but everyone needs to be self-assertive in the mentorship in which they would like to obtain, right? So yeah, I work at a big place. We have a lot of conversations about mentorship, and I think you can't force it though, right? So you have to go and you have to say, hey, with someone that you would like to be mentored by, and say like, hello, would you like to have a coffee? And you have to like organically kind of insert yourself into that situation. And I think more times than not, every time I've done that, it's been sure, I would love to, like you want my help, right? And I feel that, right, as someone who's been doing this now for like almost 12 years, it's like people are like, oh, Megan, like can we get a coffee? I like want to have, chat with you about this thing. And like, that was so helpful what you said. And I think but you kind of have to put yourself out there. And it's like, if you ask, you shall receive, quite literally, So I think it's something that we all have to invest in. And then also, I guess the second part of that is, yes, I do feel like I've had really amazing mentors. I said this, but like both older and younger than myself, it's very important to like look up and look down, make sure you're staying current. But yeah. So I feel very lucky to have had many a mentor, both male, female, and ever in between in my career. So
perfect. Tara, the role of mentorship in your life and career.
Yeah, I think I did a little bit of the opposite of what you did, Megan. I feel like I crowdsourced my mentorship, right? So I leaned hard into joining organizations. When I was in grad school, I joined NEWH, USGBC, ASID, of course, also IIDA. Any organization I could join, I was in it. And not only was I in it, I tried to volunteer in some capacity on a student board or a committee or something like that. So I got to know a lot of people really quickly, and the mentorship kind of came naturally, right? So it wasn't me asking specifically for coffee to meet up, but it was, we're working together on this committee and just have an organic conversation about career path or what's next. So I think that was my route to mentorship. And then the specifics came a little later when I wanted a more focused answer or opinion on something, but I had already built up that network of potential mentors and advisors that I could choose from. And it wasn't just one person and one perspective. And then now on the flip side, I feel like because I've gotten a lot of that help and I could think back to very specific people. I mentioned Ronnie earlier. There's a lot of people that I can think specifically to that have helped me get to where I am. I have no choice but to do the same, right? I just naturally want to give back and do that. So I think the ultimate choice in that is becoming an adjunct professor in addition to my full-time design career. So giving back to students in that way and being a teacher, I think is really important. And the class I've taught the most is professional practice. So I really stress that effort too of mentorship and networking and giving back. And I also get the same thing now, which baffles me still when people reach out like, hey, I want to pick your brain and talk to you. I still feel like I'm not at that point, but clearly I'm at that point. And I was just talking to a student last week who wanted to reach out and understand how I've gotten to this point in my career, what were the steps that I've taken. So hopefully she's on if she is hygienic. But I think that's really nice to have that come full circle and be able to give back in that way.
Yeah, that's great.
Perfect. What would be the best piece of advice that you would give to, so my officially scripted question says emerging designers, but I think for anyone in general, what would be the best piece of advice that you would give that's related to this moment that we're living in now, related to the profession? Things are shifting and changing and people are reevaluating themselves and their careers. What's some current advice from Tara and from Megan that we can all use?
Well, I'll say, so I'll stand by. I know my answers were you posted on the IIDA website, but I think it really is something that it was instilled in me. Just from back in the early days. That's what everyone in London says. But like, it really is about listening, learning, and never arriving at the table empty-handed or without a point of view. And that goes for design, and it goes for all these other types of diversity and inclusion conversations that are being had, you know, again, on all levels. And then the other thing I say is like, you can only move upwards and onwards to the next level of leadership when you're able to train and empower someone, mentor someone, right, to sort of step into your place. So, you know, we all hold different things close to the chest. Design in general is a really hard thing to not hold close to the chest sometimes. But I think it really is about, that's the way in which the only way to go up is to sort of have, you know, build a team and have them help you get there. So, yeah.
I love that, Megan, to, you know, show up and have a perspective and have a point of view. And I'm hearing a bit of be unafraid in there as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to take a chance. Yeah.
You know, yeah. Tara.
Well, that was my answer as well, as show up. But I think in addition to showing up, right, my other thing that I always stress on, I talked a little bit about this already, is just the power of network. And I think for emerging designers, especially, you can never start too early. I think back now to some connections that were my classmates in school, both undergrad and grad. They're now either leading firms or they're associates, or they're doing something interesting that I can talk to them about. And back then, when you're, you know, having fun in the studio, you're not really thinking that far ahead. But if you just build those connections from early and you stick with them, they are going to be your resources moving forward. So network and build a community.
Perfect. So Megan, you've just had a fairly major relocation. You made a move from New York to London. What kind of differences are you seeing in life and work in that geographic relocation?
Well, I've been making a lot of jokes about this, but at work, so, you know, New York's New York, right? Work hard, play hard, man. And that goes for everybody. It does go for Gensler as well, right? And so I used to think, I was like, yeah, I was like one of the chill people in the New York office, right? I could like neutralize a mood, neutralize a room, like, and here I am like so intense for some people, right? Because London is so chill, just in terms of culture, and it's really amazing. Actually, it's so wonderful. It's been the most warm response that I could have ever hoped for. But I think I was actually just talking to Cheryl, you know, Carlos Posada very well. I was just having this conversation with him yesterday that personalities of like all cities have a personality, right?
Absolutely.
And all cities have like insecurities and non-insecurities, and like, so we were talking about like diversity of cities, and but we were talking about the fact that like New York is obviously extremely diverse, and so is London, but London seems to be a lot more comfortable with the fact that it's so diverse. And you can feel it. You can feel it when you move around and when you talk to people, and that, like when you're in a bodega or when you're in a cab or when you're in the office, like everyone's really comfortable with kind of pretty much everything that's going on, and that's so refreshing. So there's a lot, I think it feels like you have to fight less for it here, which is really wonderful, and sort of like it's like a breath of fresh air in a way. And that's obviously, I think, just kind of like the natural geographics of the world, right? Like London is very much more a worldly hub. I mean, New York is too, but it's still right on the edge of the States, right? Which has its own power, you know, like personality. So yeah, it's been really great. But I keep joking with people, but I'm like too energetic and intense for them, because I'm like, I've got that New York kinetic energy, you know, and they're like, okay, slow your roll, you know.
That's amazing. You have to adjust your cadence maybe a bit.
Yeah.
Or
I
not.
need to learn how to like, chill a little more. And I thought I was chill, but yeah.
Tara, so you were a SCAD student and now you're an adjunct professor. And in those years, from making that shift from being a student to being an educator, have there been some changes in curriculum or approach or the student perspective that you've noticed?
Yeah, I think there's been a shift to have the students be more integrated into the industry before graduating. So SCAD has always been pretty good about that, but I've seen it be an increased effort to bring more presenters in or have the students work on a real life project as part of their studio course. So they get that experience of seeing their creations come to life versus it just going to live in a portfolio for the rest of time, right? So it's that real life experience that they're trying to bring into the curriculum now so that students are prepared and not going to a job site for the first time when they're a junior at a firm. So I've seen that shift. And then what I also try to stress too, again, networking and building your connections and really putting yourself out there so that the first time someone hears of you isn't when you're trying to get a job, right? So they would know, okay, you were on that committee, we worked on this together. So I think getting your name out there in some capacity other than here's my resume is a really important thing. And the third part is also building on those skills that are outside of technicals, right? So not just, I know Revit, I know how to do a rendering. Can you storytell? Like, are you crafting authentic ways to talk about your work? Do you have those community skills, those leadership skills, really focusing on those things outside of the technical that can show why you would be a good addition to someone's firm?
Yeah.
I have a point of view.
Yeah,
that's so
they
important.
have a point of view.
Yeah.
Tara, have you noticed any shifts in what students expect in their careers or their future careers as designers? Are they bringing any different expectations to SCAD?
I think in general, emerging students are really challenging the expectations of firms in work-life balance, what can be given to them in addition to what they can provide to firms. So I think in general, that's a generational thing as well, but really focusing on how they can have a successful life without the burnout, right? Without that culture of, work, 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 work. There's a good shift, I feel like, in terms of creating a balance or wanting that balance, and not only wanting it, but demanding it from the firms that they're going to.
Yeah. The irony over the years has been, design is such a life affirming profession, right? It is all about, creating satisfaction and comfort and making something better. Yet the profession of design has often not been life affirming for a lot of people. It's been exhausting. And there's been a lot of conversation as of late that we all need to do a better job, about how we talk about design, but then also looking at the things that potentially make design exhausting. I think about foundation year, in design school, and it's almost like a hazing. Some thoughts from either of you about work-life balance in design and how we can all maybe be better about that, and possibly how firms can do a better job of again, continuing that conversation of design being life affirming and not life robbing.
It was funny because I recently shared a status from 10 years ago from my senior year when I was doing my BFA, and all the status said was, this will all be worth it. This will all be worth it. This will all be worth it, ... And I remember back, I think I had not slept in 3 days straight. I was trying to get some projects done. I drank so much Monster and Red Bull, just trying to power through. But that's normal, right? That's normal for studios and finals. So I think we really have to focus on how to get the results we need without that exhaustion, without that burnout. It's a little hard because then when you graduate, you get out into the industry, there's clients demanding certain timelines. But I think we as designers need to do a better job in educating clients and people wanting design services from us what the expectations really are for a timeline, and really sticking by, if we say we need 4 weeks, that's the 4 weeks we need. Because I always think about other professions that people go to, they don't demand for things to be done faster a lot of times. And I think because they see it as something that can be sped up or slowed down, the clients kind of drive that. So I think if we do a better job of explaining exactly what it is we do, so they have a true understanding of what interior design is beyond drawing a room in a nice little 3D sketch on paper. Then they can go, oh, well, if I change this, then all these other things have to be changed, and that requires time. So really, I think the answer is explanation and really educating the public on what it is that we actually do.
Constant communication. Yeah. Megan.
Communication. Yeah, I was gonna say, like, there's so many things, but so my like professional answer is, yeah, it's about like project management and scheduling and setting expectations and sticking to those expectations, because we are experts and we know what it takes to do what we do. And, you know, and you don't back down from that. But it's like where we, as designers, as people who want to give and create and invent things that did not exist before, right? Like I was thinking, you're like, I was like, yeah, I've like seen my posts on Facebook from like 12 years ago. And I'm like, that is so funny. And you just remember back to it. But the reason why you stayed up for 3 days is because you were trying to make it the best thing that it could be. Right. And so I often say that, and this is why, you know, I think for me, at least, like I've worked at Gensler for 11 years. I will work here for probably 11 more, because I need people who aren't designers to like manage me, right? I need like a project manager who's like, go home. And like, I need like, well, actually, no, you need to stop. Be like, we don't have fee to do that, right? So you're doing too much. We need to like go for ad service, and to be trained in that way, to sort of think about not just the creative solution, you know, and making it the best thing that it can be. You talked earlier too about like your OCD, like, right? And so it's like, so I think it's making sure that we're bringing and people to the table that in some ways like aren't necessarily great at design, but they're great at, but they understand it and they respect it and they're great at managing it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like aces and spaces, right? It's making sure that our project teams are balanced. And but yeah, ultimately, like you said, like we just have to like set and reset and keep saying, you know, what the expectations are, and make sure that we're standing up for ourselves and for our teams. You know, I think that's a really, really important thing that I've learned, is that as someone who's worked with people who both leaders who do stick up for the teams and leaders who don't stick up for the teams, right? It's like you have to, like that. It's the only way to sort of keep and retain talent is if we listen and care for them and look out for them, as well as ourselves. So it's yeah, it's a up down thing, right? So
you got a woot woot for project managers in the chat.
Yeah.
And multiple, and lots of preach going on in the chat.
Really,
so
can't live without them.
Yeah. Let me ask both of you. I know, Terry, you're in a little bit of a different place in your life, but are either of you currently working on anything right now that you hope will create change in the industry? Now, Terry, you're teaching, and that's creating change.
You're changing you're changing the youth.
Yeah.
And that is more important than any work that any of us could ever do.
Yeah. Any project in front of you, Megan, that is going to create some good change?
Oh my gosh, I feel like there's so many projects that are in the works that are like, we're like, well, I don't know what the change is going to be because we're doing so much exploratory thinking right now. But I do have a project that's just about to go into construction in New York. And it's such a great little story. So it's for a code consultant firm that we work with all the time, right? And code consulting, it's like, okay, well, that's boring. But they do building code consulting, but they also do sustainability consulting. And just as a group of people, they're super cool. And they were like, from the beginning, they said, you know, we want to do sustainability, not for sustainability's sake, but we want to do intentional sustainability. And we also want our office to be able to sort of, when we bring people through, whether it's students or our family or whoever, we want there to be like a narrative that we can tell them, right? So they wanted a space for the story, which is like, I almost like died. I was like, that's what I love to do. And so so we're using a chilled beam system in the ceiling. And so basically it's going to be the latest, greatest version of Pompidouing a ceiling where every function has a color. And they're going to be able to explain the ways in which the whole building system is sustainable. And then they're doing so many other things. And then adding on to that, like one of the things was every single material or furniture piece or, you know, anything that's going in has to have some type of a sustainable story. So it doesn't, it's like we're not using, like not everything has to be 100% recycled. And also it needs to be functional, right? So some stuff, some things it's like, this is made out of like, you know, like tea bags and it's like falls apart if you sit on it, right? And it's like, okay. But so not sustainability for sustainability's sake, but the fact that, so I think for me and for the team, what was really amazing was that sometimes you just really have to ask, and everyone has those products, and we were just able to like kind of in a way like sort through all the haziness and just be like, oh well, these are obviously the best, most amazing things that we should be using. And I think that, you know, we talk about this all the time. Again, as a firm like Gensler, we have scale, and so, you know, making sure that we're like, there's no reason we shouldn't just be using those materials all the time, right? And that helps push and guide. It's not even like a force, it's just like guiding the industry to just like change certain ways that they're manufacturing something. It doesn't, and a lot of times it's like more cost effective for everyone, right? And so it's, you know, I think it's amazing in that like our client was just like, we really want this thing. So can you like, you know, craft a story to do that thing? And then through that, like that taught our team like how kind of easy it was to just, like produce an entire product that had this amazing sustainability story. And then that's become, you know, part of a really bigger conversation at the firm, but you know, that should just be what we're doing every single day.
The influence that designers have within our industry is amazing. I think we talk sometimes about the influence of an entire firm, but the influence that a single designer can have over an aspect of a project or a client is incredible. And I, you know, I think we talk about all the time, you know, don't forget how powerful you are as a designer. And really? Tara, I didn't mean to blow you off that, hey, she's teaching, she's doing amazing things. Is there anything about what you're teaching or how you're teaching that is going to bring about change in the industry or bring about change in your students' lives?
I'm still fairly new to the whole teaching thing. It's been a year and a half, but I want to be approachable, right? I want to be a resource to students, and I don't want them to have this kind of imaginary barrier, like, oh, I can't ask her these things, or I'll seem stupid if I, you know, ask these questions. So I try, hopefully I'm succeeding, but I try to teach my classes in a way that it feels authentic and I'm approachable. You're learning from me, but also it's a conversation, right? It's not something where it has to be top down just by the structure of how classes are, but I really want them to see me as an equal, someone that they can approach and ask their questions and pull resources from even after they leave my class.
I loved how you said that about imaginary barriers. There are so many things I think that many of us haven't done or won't do because there are these imaginary barriers that are in the way. So I love that comment about being approachable. We are in the audience portion of the, I've got some questions from the audience before we move. This like time flew by. I just looked at the time. I'm like, oh, holy
Always
heck.
does. So good.
Here, so this seems to be a really common question. This has been asked by multiple people, but as a woman leader, how would you request mentorship if the current leaders only have a white male leadership perspective? Like that's a very common construct in our industry. And so, you know, how do we move within that white male leadership structure? And how do we, and then this person is asking, how do you request mentorship if your current leaders only have that perspective?
You don't go to those guys.
You don't go.
I was going to say the same thing.
I mean, like, yeah, it's like what you said. Yeah, but also like, I think, right, it's like what you were saying earlier, it's like you look to the places in which you know that you have like the IIDA, IIDCEC, these like any type of organization you can join. You look to your, right, anyone that you trust and who will listen and have a conversation with you and sort of give you advice on your career. And then I do think though, and that's probably because I'm just always like, well, we can change anything, you know, it's like, you know, using that to then go back to the white male leadership and have a perspective and have a view and try to kind of edge it forward. And it doesn't always happen, right? And you're right, like I kind of have some of those things too, where I'm like, well, no, then I just would never be there. But yeah, making sure that, just it doesn't have to be those guys. It can be a lot of other amazing, willing people. So yeah.
And if it is
We're
those
on the same
guys,
page.
if it is those guys are also potential allies too.
Mhm.
Because we have to remember as we're
Mhm.
building,
Yes.
you know, our mentorship networks and our sponsorship networks, we're also building allyship networks too.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not to say that, you know, you absolutely don't go to them as mentors. I don't think I personally would, but you can have a conversation with them and come to them and provide information, as you said, Megan. But I would look elsewhere for my mentors who can understand me, right? Because we move through the world based on, as much as we hate it, these biases that are put upon us. So to have someone else understand the similar barriers that you face moving through the world, they can help you better and more strategically. And I don't know what I have in common with a white man in the C-suite, right? So you find the people that can relate to your perspective.
Yeah. That's so good.
Another question. How do we make shifts toward doing more equitable design work? So not just for the 1%, but still make money in a for-profit firm.
Ooh, where's Kia Weatherspoon now? I think just by starting, right? So reaching out to those communities, seeing where the needs are and seeking out to meet those needs. It's a little harder than just that, but that's a place I think that I would start in looking for where those opportunities are and not just providing design that is just going to meet the functional needs, but going beyond and providing nicer design for those that need it, right? So making sure it is equitable, you are designing and putting the same amount of effort in those designs as you would for the $1 million projects.
I'll also say, I think, you know, championing artists, creatives, product designers that, you know, are all of these, you know, sort of independently owned, diverse, you know, companies and sort of crafters and makers, right? And making sure that, you know, so many of the, you know, Fortune 500 companies have initiative, like really solid initiatives. They give a lot of sort of time, effort, thought, money, positions to people to literally move their actions and practices and the way that they do business forward. And so they're open to all of those stories of, you know, muralists that are, you know, were imprisoned and now they're not. And they want the stories of the women who hand weave rugs in India to, you know, sustain a women's shelter. And they'll pay for those. They'll pay for those things, like to support those initiatives. And I think that's a way that I've always been like, well, all right, who are we going to help on this job, right? Like we actually have some, you know, and I think it's it's sort of being like, okay, here's my parameters, right? And how can I affect change in this situation? For those that are listening who have to who do that on a daily basis, I think there's so many ways for us to affect it through design, right? So.
Do either of you, both of you, do you feel that the level of respect for interior design as a profession has changed and shifted since you've been out of school or since you've been practicing? The genesis of this question is a number of folks are asking, interior design obviously is a female-dominated profession. There has been a traditional bias with architecture being the, you know, identified as a male profession, interior design as a more female profession. We know that some of the bias around our profession has developed from just that simple fact. In your time in this profession, have you seen shifts in the appreciation, the understanding of interior design as a profession? And are there still opportunities for us to continue to advance the profession of interior design?
I think it's gotten better. It's not great. It's still not great. I still have all those examples. I'm sure many can relate. If I'm going onto a job site and I have a male interior designer counterpart, they tend to look to that person for the answers, even if I'm the lead on the project and they might be a junior, right? So it's those things where it's very annoying knowing that you are still not viewed on your level when you approach certain people that you work with. But the more we promote interior design, the more we talk about what it is and educate the public, I think that has gotten better. I do my part all the time. Naturally, if I'm in an Uber and someone asks me what I do, I go down the spiel of, okay, this is interior design, not decorating. This is actually what we do. Whether they ask me or not, I kind of go into that explanation.
Yeah.
So I feel like slowly, one by one, I am reaching a lot of people. And so then they understand, and I see it in real time where they go, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, so this is what it is. It's like the interior architecture versus the exterior, and they kind of get it.
Yeah. You
So I
literally
think
see that light bulb go off.
yeah, you
Yeah.
literally see it, and sometimes they say, oh, I never knew, but thanks for the explanation. So that's my small little part of
Yeah.
trying to change that slowly but surely.
Yeah, one person at a time. Totally
Mhm.
agree. Megan, have you seen, you mentioned you've been, right, 11 years, 12 years at Gensler. Have you seen in that time attitudes around interior design shift and change, not necessarily at your firm, but in the general
Yeah.
public?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I heard someone say the other day, well, building new buildings isn't sustainable. It was like an architect around here. It was like, well, building new buildings isn't sustainable. And it's like, yeah, no, shit, it's never been sustainable, but okay, thanks for like, and so again, I just think we're in such a position of power to be like, well, yeah, so I've always, studied existing conditions and figured out how to make those work, right, for everything that we're doing moving forward. So I think that, again, it's sort of like realizing the power that we have, right? I'm feeling very like came out of COVID and it was a little weird for a while. And then now I'm like, wow, actually, right? Because, anyway, those of us who've been pontificating about all of those things while we were sitting at home, but yeah. So I think again, we're just like, the world's ready for us. They always,
Yeah.
we've always been here. And now we're just like, because we've been doing the thing, we're going to like kind of come out and lead in full force. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
my optimism speaking, but
At-
yeah, but I
no,
really do feel that way.
It completely is. Interior design is a profession that is predicated on optimism. And, how can you be anything but about the condition of this profession, about yourself, about the condition of what this profession can do for the world? Last question. Speaking of optimism, what are you optimistic about, both now and moving forward?
I'll say,
What are
well,
you
I
optimistic about?
kind of gave it away, but I feel, COVID was hard for everyone. And for me, I joke that like I cried every day about something different and, you never really know. But the world hit pause for 2 years and then everyone had a lot of time to think about everything that was being fire hosed at them and a lot of crazy, wonderful, hurtful, like so much happened during that time. And, I think those of us who really took it all in and felt it and like actually processed it and are coming out of this with actionable like sort of plans forward of how we're going to affect change. And that is, that's knowledge is power. And I think that it's like a wonderful time to be alive. It's especially if you are like, you care about a lot of things, you care about people, you care about, right, like your teams, your family, your communities, like right, because there's so much to be done and everyone just has all of that pent up energy and is ready to go. And again, it's those of us who have always like really given a shit that like have the knowledge to actually move these things forward and be leaders of that. So yeah.
I love that, Megan. It's a great time to give a damn, right?
Yeah, it really is. I have a huge pennant in my apartment that literally says, give a damn. It's like a big flag. And it's
There
like,
you go.
yeah, it's because that's, thank you for caring is something I say to my teams all the time. Just thank you for caring, right?
Love that.
Yeah.
Tara, what are you optimistic about?
I agree with everything that Megan just said. I think the pandemic was awful, terrible, but the things that come out of it, I am optimistic about our return to humanity, right? So we got to see each other, like really, really see each other when we took that pause. And I feel like coming out of it, we've kept those good aspects, right? So we know, okay, well, so-and-so is going to go to a soccer game to watch her kid at 5 o'clock, or, you know, they have to watch their baby and the baby's on Zoom, like things like that, where you really got to see into people's lives. And I feel like that brought us closer together than any happy hour or networking event that we could have done. And I am optimistic about continuing that connection with people and really working so that we don't, right, have that burnout, have that culture creep back in where it's all work 100%. We all have lives outside of this. And I feel like we kind of hid that fact before the pandemic, and now it just blew everything open, like, oh, we actually have lives outside of being designers. So I am excited to move that forward and really connect more strategically and purposefully with people that I have to work with.
Yeah, yeah. That, you know, hustle culture is not a badge of honor. And, you know, the most important thing a designer can do for their clients is demonstrate that they have a life. You're relatable, you're connectable, you're accessible. So I'm optimistic that this profession is being led by an example of two amazing women like Megan and Tara. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to everyone in the audience. We didn't get to all of your questions, but I swear I want to do like part 2 of this during NeoCon. So everybody's invited. And I would love to continue this conversation. But thank you all. Tara, Megan, keep doing your thing. And to Nanette, we love you and miss you, and we want you to feel better. And everyone stay tuned. There'll be more collective design coming your way in May.